Well, good afternoon, John. John Donovan.
Hey, Marty Keller.
Good to see you as always. Welcome to everybody who's joining us for this Intentional Living podcast. This is a podcast that we do on a regular basis to explore the question of how do I deal with behaviors that feel compulsive, things that show up for me, make me behave a certain way, even when my conscious mind's going, don't do that, don't do that. And yet I
Mm-hmm.
can't stop myself from doing that, whatever that is. It might be something as simple as don't eat that candy bar, and
Right.
then my hand's putting the candy bar in my mouth. Or it might be something much more serious. Don't hit my wife. Don't and there my hand comes up and hits her.
Right.
So one of the major focuses of this podcast is exploring the sources of these behavioral compulsions and seeing if we can't demystify those behaviors, find ways to befriend the sources where they're coming from and create a different experience out of those same inner uh, energies.
Mm-hmm.
We don't believe here in trying to change them, fix them, try to be compulsive toward the compulsions. We have a different approach here that believes these things have a purpose, and we want to discover whether that purpose is still useful. And if it's not useful, can we repurpose them? So that's what we do here in the Intentional Living podcast. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been on an extended conversation exploring the relationship between the accountability practice, which is the core of the intentional living focus, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and all the programs that spun off from AA. Many of the people who are exploring their own recovery with us in collegial uh, fraternity with us through the meetings of the intentional living groups
Mm-hmm.
are either veterans of or still participants in a 12-step program. And as I said when we first started this a couple of weeks ago, John, I get a lot of questions. I think you do too, from people who are in program about um, some of the differences. Sometimes they think they hear things from sponsors or other people in their 12-step program that seem to contradict things that we might say in an intentional living meeting. And so what we thought we would do is see if we can't explore the differences and see whether there are some places that diverge, and see if we can't demystify those things as well. Last week, we talked about, um, we started to take a look at the steps themselves and see where the steps might be finding resonance in the accountability tree process. That's the process that's the heart of this practice. And we looked at the fourth step, which is made a fearless moral inventory of our character defects in AA, or in ACA, made a fearless moral inventory of our parents, because in essence we'd become them. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, there are ways that it's a way to encourage looking at those things about ourselves that we previously didn't acknowledge, things that were buried in our subconscious that showed up as those kinds of compulsions that we were talking about, behaviors that we don't like about ourselves, secrets that we don't want to tell about ourselves, because the heart of the accountability practice is telling a truth that has been trying to worm its way into our consciousness, and we've been finding ways to avoid or to turn it into something else. And then we looked at the second part of the accountability practice is after I tell the truth about what's going on with me. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm really resentful.
Mm-hmm.
So I might have said somebody else is behaving as resentfully, and then okay, the truth is I'm resentful, and feel the emotional resonance of owning my own resentment. And the next step, after I'm willing to feel the physical impact of stating a truth about myself, say, what do I want? And setting that into an intention. So it becomes an action step. What do I do with this information about the truth I've uncovered about myself?
Right. Yeah.
In 12 steps, the action steps are uh, humbly asking God or higher power to remove our character defects. That's the 7th step. And then 8th and 9th steps, making a list of people to whom we should make amends and then making those amends. So it's a little bit different in our accountability practice from the action steps of the 12 steps. And of course, then there's the 10th step, which is continue to make a fearless moral inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Or in uh, Tony A's version of the adult children of alcoholic steps, continue to take a fearless moral inventory and to love and approve of ourselves. Another action step, and that's an action step of continuing to deepen our practice. And in our accountability practice, our action step is I do the tree every time I feel something disruptive or painful, or I find another compulsion is revealed, and so I just do the
Right.
accountability tree practice.
Mm-hmm.
So the way we left it after we had that review is we were talking about. I pointed out that in the accountability practice we don't specifically refer to a higher power or to God, and
Right.
you were talking about the subconscious. That in the subconscious, when we can get in touch with those energies down there, that in a certain way is an opening to something greater than ourselves. And we basically left it. We're going to elaborate more on that today. So does that seem uh, does that seem to have encaptured or encapsulated what we
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about last time?
Yeah. Yeah. And um, the 12-step program, they actually identified it as a spiritual process, and they use
Right.
uh, their term is higher power. And one of the creators of that was helping Bill W. and Dr. Bob was agnostic. And when they had God, turn my will and my life over to care of God, um, they thought that might be off-putting, so they used the term higher power to be attractive to more diverse people, which I believe worked. And as a counselor therapist, we do not talk about religion or spirit, and it's more clinical. The clinical goal of treatment, at least the one I'm with, is 4 things: emotional regulation, impulse control, frustration tolerance, and delayed gratification. Um, and they stick to plans and relapse prevention and psychodynamics, pharmacology, the workings of the body and how the chemistry messes up with the body. So um, the accountability practice I developed as a counselor at Sacramento County Jail. So that practice was something I just did, and working with a diverse population, which was Christians, Muslims, agnostics, atheists. It worked well. Although um, it's actually, even though I didn't overtly refer to spirit, um, spirit has to be part of it. So um, I talked about the accountability tree as allowing me to recreate the emotion of family of origin trauma, family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma. Um, and in that emotional, I think the last time I talked about collapse is actually feeling the impact of my current behavior based on my trauma, which is subconscious. It's like a funnel, and the feeling goes down. It's almost to a point where it's validated. And in that moment of validation, simply telling the truth, blame-free, judgment-free, there's a relief moment. And I call it like a portal to my imagination, inspiration, intuition. Well, imagination, inspiration, intuition are all invisible means of support or ideas, or our creativity, our capacity to accept where we're at, being completely present in our body, blame free, judgment free, not being positive, negative, right, wrong. And that place in breaks us into our spiritual capabilities. And those are imagination, inspiration, intuition, where I find myself speaking without having to think about or have an agenda or a point to prove. I find myself speaking and saying things from that place that now become inclusive of myself first, my well-being, and depending on the relationship, if it's an intimate, connected relationship, the well-being of the other person, where that other person just shifted from being the enemy to a partner with conflict, and the goal is to be inclusive. Maybe not agree 100%, but be inclusive. See the other person for who they are, who she is. In my case, it would be a she. And then choose to be in relationship with her. That's this process. I have found myself, and usually as a facilitator, listening to myself speak to whatever issue might be brought to, or explanation of how the material works. And it's like a free flow. And that's what I now know, my experience of being connected to spirit. And spirit is a big word. It encompasses, everybody has an idea of what that is. My idea of what that is the what I call God supporting me through love, kindness, compassion. Even though I may be in a conflict or a disagreement or a need to express myself clearly, and that connection to spirit, I want to say spirit, source. Some people believe in angels, hierarchy of angels, guardian angel, archangels, and in between, that are here to support me in this evolutionary process or growth process, where I grow in my character, which speaks to my capacity for inclusion, which is spiritual, which is God stuff, which is in the Ten Commandments. Thou shalt, honor your father and your mother. Thou shalt not kill. All the put God first, not take God's name in vain, which are spiritual commandments, edicts. It's another word for that that I'm not thinking of. I want to suggestions. Suggestions isn't the word I'm looking for, but to be well and to expand my consciousness to a higher degree, which is our spiritual journey, is to become godlike or Christ-like. He showed us the way, so we, depending on who you are, that was my thing. Walk like he walked, which means I have to get a lot out of the way for me to manifest just his characteristics, maybe not his power, miracle power, but his characteristics of kindness, compassion, inclusiveness. And I'm going to say he had a capacity for setting really healthy boundaries, with people who really didn't care about him or anything else, and just he kept himself safe in the dialogue. I know that he got crucified. That was part of the plan, his plan. I don't know, but yeah, I don't. In the material with intentional living, I don't come out and say this is spiritual. The end result is on a spiritual level. There's a something that happens intuitively. I get inspiration in the moment, or I'm inspired to do something I normally wouldn't do. Um, and I've come to appreciate that place, so I work hard to get back and maintain and sustain that place of what I call inclusiveness, which is connected to my emotional feeling body. Invisible means of information, invisible means of gathering information for my well-being, which now includes the well-being of the people around me. And I don't have to like them. I don't have to invite them over to my house. And I'm going to act with integrity and compassion with all people. And sometimes that may be a hard, firm, and this is not okay. I need to go. I'm not participating with you in trying to figure out who's right. Things like that. So
We know
I'm
it's
going to stop now. Go ahead.
okay. Great, thank you. What's interesting, lots of things swirling in my mind, but what's interesting to start with is the wisdom of the founders of the 12-step program to revisit the use of the word God, because so many of us found some kind of trauma in our religious upbringing.
Yes.
Um, I still work with people who recoil at the word God or the word Jesus, and so the good news is in our process, in the intentional living process, that is that is something that can be taken to the tree. That can be, it's like, okay, let's let's walk through that experience. What goes on when you hear me say Jesus? What's your feeling?
Mm-hmm.
We can forget the we can forget spiritual implications and go to the feeling. That's what I love. Secondly, about the process is that the process doesn't require thought of any kind. It doesn't. It's a very practical practice. That's why we call it practice of
Right.
feeling what's going on in my body when I own a truth about myself that is, and usually in the way we get at this, for those of you who are new to this, is we do this through facilitated meetings where the facilitator, John and I both facilitate attentional living meetings. We have tools to help people get to that hidden experience inside, and once once we get to um, that hidden stuffed belief about ourselves, as you said earlier, there's that release that funnels down into the body. My experience, the first time I ever did one of these things, one of these breakthrough experiences, was all other reality disappeared, and there was just that
Yep.
feeling of
Yeah.
relief. I mean, there are actually many feelings that occurred at the same time, but it is difficult to explain it. It is much more profound to experience it. But I didn't have to believe in God. I didn't have to go to church. I didn't have to go to synagogue. I didn't have to go to mosque. I didn't have to stand on a ocean and watch the sunset. I didn't have to do anything like that. I just had to be present with what's going on with me in the moment. And then to complete the process, I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to have a creed. What do I want? Is a very fundamental, practical question. What do I want? And
Yeah.
the answer, whatever the answer shows up, I set that as an intention and I let that go. Now, as I said last week, there's an implication when I set an intention. There's an implication that something beside me's got some role here.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about this on this podcast before. It's not necessary to know what that is
Right.
in order for it to work.
Okay. So, correct. And in my explanation of the problem or the cunning, baffling, powerful aspect of that keeps me in a pattern of behavior, whether it's cunning, baffling, and powerful. When I first got into recovery, to give a little backstory, I heard that phrase. Somebody said, "This is a cunning, baffling, powerful disease," and my thought was, "Oh, cool. What's cunning, baffling, and powerful?" And I got responses back like, "Let go and let God, John, one day at a time," which was sage information. I needed to hear that, and it didn't answer my question. So I'm lost what you said right at there to make this connection. But I'm going to bring up the share screen
Okay.
and talk about cunning, baffling, and powerful, and the subconscious. The subconscious is a lot more than where we store our memory. And all our experiences are stored in our memory.
Hold on a second.
9/10 of them. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hold on a second if I could, just so people know that thing that John's got there. That's supposed to be an iceberg,
Right.
and the metaphor here is that, like an iceberg, most of what goes on we don't see. And
Correct.
we're about to say that's 9/10, and it could be even more than that of
Right.
our mind is in that beneath the awareness part.
hmm So I made a referral last time to Jung and what he called collective unconscious or archetypes, and this subconscious, we can call that. I refer to that. My picture that I have of it is connected to quantum field. See, to me, saying quantum field of possibilities, is the same thing as saying higher power, God, potential, um, invisible means of support. Um, and the way we're built as human beings is that part of us is subjective. It's subconscious. That's what the SUB means, subconscious, below the conscious level, not unconscious, but in our consciousness, below the level of accessibility. Although active, all that trauma and experience motivates every decision we make. So our midbrain, brain stem, has the capacity to access anything in our experiences that relate to whatever may be going on in the moment. Okay, an example of that for in the natural world, a twig breaks. A gazelle hears the sound of a twig break. He knows that there's a lion coming. He doesn't know. He just knows that sound and reacts and starts running, gets the hell out of there. That's the subconscious actively keeping that um, animal safe. Well, in our subconscious, if I was with a parent and they raised an eyebrow and I got demeaned, diminished, ridiculed, traumatized, or physically abused, that's in there. So I'm in real life now as a 75-year-old adult. Somebody raises their eyebrow and I find myself in one of these reaction responses: fight, flight, freeze, please. Um,
Automatically.
Automatically. And it happens before I can think about it. My subconscious happens before I have awareness that I'm in the movement.
Right.
Um, and that's where all what I call the results of the display of complex post-traumatic stress happen in the present moment. Okay. the subconscious, and I'm going to speak to my own experience here. When I heal in here, in my subconscious, heal some of the trauma, my behavior has changed. And I want to say, finding myself with the capacity in situations to be compassionate. I'm finding myself with the capacity to be kind. No matter what the outside situation is, I can still express kindness or I can express concern, where before I would move into an arrogant, entitled, mean, or controlling reaction. I am now present and able, okay, that's coming from my subconscious. So getting back to my opinion, that subconscious part of me is connected to the field, or what Jung suggested would be the collective unconscious. And my actions today, not only my heal actions like kindness, compassion, not only assist me in my well-being and include the people around me, that's inclusive, I'm at some level giving that out into the universe. It's like a pebble in a pond. If I act in kindness and my subconscious is connected to the race conscious, I want to say super sensible, but that's a new word. I haven't talked about that. Spiritual aspect of our humanity. It affects, like the pebble in the pond, the rings go out forever. And I'm adding an energy to the collective consciousness that now has kindness. See, I believe this is what Christ did in his life and experience and his work and his walk. He set into the matrix, which is we that's what I'm calling the collective unconscious, subconscious, the capacity for us to choose love, despite what's going on around us. Now, everything I'm saying is spiritual. This process, without having to mention spiritual, gave me the experience of connectedness. That's spiritual. Okay. And when I work with somebody for a while, we get into this conversation. We get into the conversation about higher power, connectedness, and concern for a wider range of people, a bigger sphere of concern. One of the examples I used before my recovery, my sphere of concern was limited. It was me, my gun rack, my truck, screw you, get out of my way. Now my sphere of concern has slowly grown to familiar, neighbors, community, 12-step, to national, to global. I have this way of just noticing things happen and feeling about it in a compassionate, sad, tragic, experiencing these feelings and remaining in my center, knowing that this center touches all. We can get into quantum physics, entanglement. That when I feel this here, there's an, I don't know if it's entanglement or available to everybody else. I might be getting off track. I might be getting confusing. You can say something if you need to. This accountability practice gave me the experience of connected to self, relieving and healing trauma, which now didn't affect my decision-making process as it did before it was healed. And that's that raised eyebrow situation. Somebody can, let me give another example. When I was in high school, I was walking down the hallway and this couple turned the corner around the building, around one of the classes, and they started laughing. And I found myself bum rushing these people, saying, "What's so damn funny?" Well, that's me and my trauma taking it personal. I didn't want to be the butt of a joke, and it didn't matter. I took everything personal. Now, now when I hear people laughing, I just wonder at what's funny. That was a cool joke. Oh, maybe I could learn that joke so I can make somebody else laugh. It's way different, and I want to say more connected, more inclusive, which is the goal of. I want to say any spirituality is the well-being of the person and how to be in community. That's spiritual. So I'm gonna stop and see where we got.
Well,
Where we're at.
we're actually coming to the end of our time, so
Uh,
I think we have to carry this over to next week. Uh,
okay.
'Cause there's still well, of course, there's always going to be more to say, right? So,
Yeah.
but I've got some notes here I'd like to raise with you next week, uh,
Okay.
and it's all very good stuff, and I'm very inspired, and I appreciate your willingness, and of course, appreciate the willingness of those of you watching this to hang in there with us because there is there is something there is something greater than us that's impelling us to want to do this recovery work.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we haven't talked about yet, John, which is what brings us to recovery work. Why do some people get into it and stick with it and make breakthroughs and other people don't? So there's you can avoid the word spiritual if you want, but as you said earlier in your thoughts, um, some of these things just live in a realm beyond the physical and beyond the biological, and
Yeah.
uh, inspiration, intuition, love, courage, all those dynamics of a human experience cannot be seen under a microscope, cannot be captured in a telescope, cannot be found in a spectrogram. These
Right.
things don't exist in the physical reality, and yet they exist. So there's a whole lot going on here to be human, which is for me the whole purpose of doing this process. I didn't know it at the time, but the whole reason I find myself now working in this process is to embrace all of what it means to be human. And
Mm-hmm.
what it means to be human often is to live in this ambiguity. Are we physical? Are we spiritual? Are we one or the other? Are we both? How does that all that work? How come sometimes my inner compulsions will obliterate what seems to be my higher spiritual capacities, et cetera, et cetera? There's something profound to being human that um, uh, doing this process has really helped me learn about, and
Mm-hmm.
I intend to learn more.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so with
And
that,
it starts a dialogue. It starts a conversation about wider, broader things. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and that's something we actually all have in common.
Mm-hmm.
We may not call it the same thing, and that's part of the fun is to learn different languages so that we can communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's what you mean by that. Oh, okay. Now let me feed that back to you and see if we now have concurrence. And that's one of the ways that we learn language. So before we wrap up, I want to let everybody know who's watching that you're invited to participate in the group process that John established many years ago and is ongoing in the Zoom environment. And at the end of the podcast, there'll be a list of different times and days where facilitated meetings are available, and you're invited to come and join us and learn about the process, ask questions, whatever works.
Yeah.
As we said at the top of the podcast, we're dealing with something that's experiential, and once we have the experience, we can then move into this kind of conversation. Because as human beings, we're stuck with language to try to explain things that cannot be reduced to words. But we're going
Right.
to do it. We're going to do it anyway.
Yeah, we are.
We have no choice. So with that, John, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to talking to you next week.
You got it.
Take care.
Yes, you too.
Okay. Bye.